Hello and welcome to Pitch Purpose, the podcast for marketing leaders in purpose-driven organisations. Behind every great business, there's a marketing team working to balance profit with purpose. I'm Emma Healy, MD and founder of PR and content agency Thinking Hat Media, and I'm joined by my fabulous co-host, Ian Scott, CEO at digital agency Exceptional.
In each episode, we talk to some of the country's most experienced CMOs and sector leaders about the moments or strategies that define their organisations and the way that they think about marketing. From campaigns that achieved a viral moment to pioneering initiatives that set a new benchmark, we uncover how those big ideas came to life and what happened afterwards. We'll explore the purpose behind each campaign, the impact it delivered, and the lessons learnt along the way, but crucially, we dig into the financials too, from rollout costs to return on investment.
So today we're joined by Mark Jarman-Howe, CEO at Essex and Herts Air Ambulance Trust, which provides advanced pre-hospital care to people facing life-threatening emergencies. The charity receives no government funding, so every mission is made possible by the generosity of donations and fundraising. Each mission costs around £2,800, and one person in every 1,000 across Essex and Herts will need access to air ambulance support every year. Mark, welcome to Pitch Purpose.
Hi Emma, hi Ian, lovely to be with you today.
Let's dive into the first campaign, the Flight for Your Life lottery. Tell us more.
So the lottery is absolutely vital to the delivery of our mission as a charity. It's been running for about sort of 15 plus years now, and it's the backbone of our fundraising. As Emma said in her introduction, we don't get any government funding, so we're absolutely reliant on community support. In the last financial year, the lottery accounted for 65% of our gross income. So it's by far our most important product line in terms of sustaining our charitable purpose. The idea behind it is that it's a fun opportunity for people across Essex and Herts to get behind their local air ambulance. In effect, it's a form of regular giving. So people generally pay either by standing order or increasingly by direct debit. So it's a sort of a regular monthly payment that's towards the air ambulance with the bonus of the opportunity to win a prize. It's a very heavily regulated product. So we work under the society lottery regulations with the Gambling Commission, and we have to meet various requirements to make sure that we're operating it sort of effectively and in line with those rules and regulations. But it's been something that we've been pushing significantly over the lifespan, and as I say, it's grown to be such a key income stream for us. What we're looking to do at the moment is make sure it's a sort of a sustainable model, and over the last couple of years we've been continuing to look at how we refresh that.
How do you measure success for a lottery? Is it going to be purely on, sort of net donations at the end of it? Talk us through, what the metrics that you measure.
So I guess there are two key success metrics for us. One is that it's a great way of us building our supporter base and for us raising the profile of what we do. And our hope is obviously that people don't just support us through the lottery, but once we've got them engaged and playing regularly, we've effectively opened up a sort of a channel of communication to supporters who are going to be warm to other asks that we might have over time. At the moment, we've got about 96,000 players in total, which is really quite phenomenal for a regional charity. And across those 96,000, they're playing 175,000 plays every week. So it's really important in terms of us sort of raising the profile, but that sort of number of plays is key because that drives the net income. And as I say, it's our single biggest income line. So that's the other really key metric for us.
Mark, what's the average spend per subscriber member?
So typically they're paying £1 a play.
Okay.
And most players are typically playing 2 lines or 2 plays every week. So they're paying £2 a week to play.
And what do those prizes look like?
So there are regular prizes that they can get every week where they can win hundreds of pounds each week. And then what we do is a rollover. and occasionally we let that sort of rollover will build up over time, and then you could win as much as 20,000 if you're really lucky.
Wow. I need to subscribe as an Essex resident.
You certainly should, Emma.
I think it's 25,000. It says 25,000 on the
Yeah,
Super Draw.
so we can go right up.
Really?
Yeah. And we tend to do that sort of 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah, wow. So it's not just about people playing to raise money for the trust, but it's also an engagement activity as a way to raise awareness about the trust and through playing, but actually subsequent to that, further interest.
Exactly. So it's the biggest source of income, but it's also the biggest source of supporters, and by far the biggest component of our sort of CRM is our lottery players. I think that's something that we can probably exploit the potential of more in the future as well, about sort of building those relationships, looking for cross-support, cross-marketing opportunities, but it gives us that huge potential, and it gives us an outlet for key messages, and we can update people about what's happening, and then hopefully those players will spread the word with their friends, family and colleagues as well.
Yeah. So how do you go about promoting the fact that the lottery exists?
So we've got a rolling sort of marketing campaign going with that, which is through our sort of social channels. It's a big part of our website. So when people are finding out about how they can support Essex and Herts Air Ambulance, is one of the first things that always pops up that we're drawing people's attention to. The thing that really drives the sort of the ongoing engagement, though, is the canvassing model that we've got. Mm-hmm. So we work with 2 specialist companies that we've built a really good relationship with over the years. One of them, we focus on venue fundraising, so that could be fetes or community events, it could be shopping centres or big superstores, and they will face-to-face canvass people, come into those venues, promote what we're doing as an air ambulance, and then give people the opportunity to play the lottery. And then the other company that we work with focuses on door-to-door canvassing. So it's a little bit old school, but it still works for us as a sort of channel, is by carefully targeting particular postcodes where we know that people have a sort of preponderance to support us. We know that we're likely to get a sort of sympathetic reaction. So we use that postcode and that demographic data to target the door-to-door, which is very successful for us and has been over the years.
You've mentioned as well that this is one of the most successful lotteries for air ambulances. How has it managed that?
So I think it's the level of focus that it's received. I think because it was very successful in its early years, the sort of succession of sort of charity management teams that have been involved in it over that time have doubled down on that success. And it's been an obvious thing for our board of trustees to invest in and to focus on, because they've been able to see the returns. I think there's also something around lotteries don't work in all demographic catchments as well. In previous roles, I've been involved in operating partnership lotteries, so running lotteries for other good causes as well, and that's sort of been across the UK. So that's sort of given feedback from a number of different sources, and we know that there are certain populations where just culturally, or where there's a preponderance of particular sort of faith populations, where the lottery just doesn't sell well. And I think the sort of the working middle class spread of population that we've got across Essex and Herts, it's really the perfect product for the catchment that we've got. So it's a combination of sort of sustained investment, having seen early success, and the fact that we have a catchment where it's a particularly attractive proposition, I think.
When you started the lottery then, were there things that you had in place as to measure early success that triggered it being fully rolled out? How did you know this was going to be something that would work?
So I think it's something that's become more sophisticated over time in terms of the metrics that we're using to judge success. In the early days, the focus was on growth, so total number of plays and gross income. And then I think as the lottery has matured as a product, we're increasingly focused on profitability. So we're really interested in what the net return is, even more so than the gross income. And we're really focusing on indicators like attrition, which is really key to in terms of sort of ensuring that you are getting a good return on investment. So basically the business model is that the vast majority of people that play the lottery have been recruited by our canvassing agencies, as I say, predominantly face-to-face, either in venues or door-to-door. What we look at first and foremost is attrition in the first 4 months. So how many people are we going to lose potentially that have signed up and then changed their mind very quickly? And the metric we track there is that we're looking for better than 1.5% attrition in the first 4 months. If we can keep it down to that level, then we know that the ROI is really good. The spend per acquisition varies quite a lot over time. Canvassing is quite a competitive and a fairly volatile market at the moment. But typically, we're talking about 12 months, give or take a couple of months, depending on prices at the time, to get the money back from having recruited someone. But one of the things we've been able to do really well, I think, within the Essex and Herts Air Ambulance lottery is to really focus on retention and build relationships over time and maintain good communication. So we know if we can get over that initial hurdle, on average, people will stay and play for about 8 years. So there's quite a significant return for us as an organisation. And last year, total income was about 9.1 million for the charity, and net income was 7.6 million, which frankly for a regional charity is pretty incredible.
That is staggering.
7.6 million net income. So we're talking a couple of million there on costs and running the lottery, but the rest is for the trust.
I mean, there aren't many things that give you that sort of margin, are there? So for us, that's 7.6 million that goes straight into our life-saving missions and bringing the emergency room to the scene. So, you know, it couldn't be more key to protecting our core work as a charity, making sure that we've got the right number of clinicians, pilots, delivering the service, and that we're able to keep the helicopters flying.
Yeah. I was just going to ask whether you've run into any ethics issues promoting gambling essentially for a positive outcome, and also the canvassing side is really interesting because the perception and some of the connotations, dare I use this word, please forgive me for that. So, you know, the chuggers, what they're called, the charity muggers. I mean, how you feel about that, but they're, you know, there are negative connotations towards that. And I just wanted to have, has EHAT encountered any negativity or backlash?
So I'm pleased to say that over the years, very minimal. I think it's right to flag that there are ethical issues, and there are definitely issues in terms of how gambling as a form of fundraising is perceived by different communities. So there is a spread of views around that, and there are definitely certain communities which are less sympathetic to that as a form of fundraising compared to others. And that's generally based on sort of faith and sort of cultural reasons. Yeah. So we always have to be really mindful to that. I think the key thing for us is it comes back to sort of, you know, the ability for us to deliver our purpose as a charity is grounded in our reputation. So everything we have to do has to be really well managed, you know, tightly quality controlled, and we have to make sure that there's really strong messaging, engagement, you know, and assurance around how we run any aspect of the organisation. But I think it's particularly true for our fundraising and particularly true for the lottery. I think the way that we've managed to sort of address some of those concerns is by constantly reinforcing the core message and why people are playing in the first place. So it's very different playing a society lottery than it is playing bingo online for some big commercial outlet, where they're really motivated to push you to play as much as possible, and they want you to spend as much of their money with you as possible. Whereas that's not really what our message is about. Our message is about a sort of a sustainable level of regular giving where you've got the added opportunity to sort of win a prize. And I think that's why it's landed so well. They know that the vast majority of the money that we raise from that activity is going direct back into the charity. They can see the benefits of that charity year in, year out, because they see the helicopters flying. You know, they might see us landing and responding to a particular incident. So they're predisposed to be sympathetic to us. But I think because we're able to demonstrate that, you know, in our reporting, in our messaging, just how much we're managing this effectively, I think it works well for us. The other thing I would say is because we are dependent on third-party providers for the canvassing, managing those relationships really proactively, having long-term relationships, having a real focus on quality metrics as well as commercial metrics is key for us. We don't chop and change canvassing organisations. We certainly, like lots of other charities, have learned from the bad publicity of
Yeah.
10, 20 years ago when, chuggers really did give charities a bad name.
Yeah.
Whereas this is very sort of grounded, tightly quality controlled and really well messaged fundraising.
Let's talk a bit more about the ethics side of it on the gambling, because I know that'll be a question that some of our listeners are going to want to understand a bit more about. So in terms of how this is different, I would imagine that it's donation first and entertainment or gaming later, rather than I'm coming purely for, to be entertained or purely just because I love gambling. It's all about how I can play along and ultimately end up donating. But what are the safeguards in place with Herts lottery that perhaps is more important in this instance?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd say is that it's purpose-led playing. So I think effectively the intention behind the playing is to make a donation. It's just they've chosen a particular form to do so. We're tightly regulated by both the Gambling Commission, but we're also following the fundraising regulator. So society lotteries and fundraising in general are heavily regulated. And there is very clear, well-established best practice within the sector. And I'm pleased to say that we've got the mechanisms in place to assure ourselves, assure our Board of Trustees and our supporters that we're following that regulation and we're following that best practice. Basically, there are safeguards around promoting awareness. There are safeguards about people being able to sort of self-restrict themselves. We do exchange information with the regulator as well, so that we can make sure that we're not targeting particular individuals. We can also track people's sort of playing behaviour over time as well. The reality is, for the vast majority of people, we're talking about no more than a couple of pounds a week that people are playing towards the lottery. We're not seeking to maximise that or extend people beyond their means. And I think that's very different to the business model behind commercial gambling organisations, particularly the sort of the websites which have sort of proliferated in recent years, where they are constantly trying to encourage people to keep coming back, and they're tracking metrics of people coming back regularly, and they're trying to encourage people to sort of spend more each time they visit, etc. That's not our model. Our model is all about sort of sustainable long-term relationships. We want that 8-year average playing time, because for us that gives us a huge amount of security and sustainability as a charity, and it allows us to plan with confidence, knowing that our single biggest income line is a predictable one. So we're not looking for to exploit that in any way. The whole business model is about actually people playing at a level that they can sustain, that we can then benefit from. But as I say, we track complaints. Our complaints are very low. In most months we have 0. And we're constantly checking in with our players as well. So we run regular campaigns where we reach out to existing players and we check in with them about the level that they're playing. Part of the reason of that, to be honest, is to keep them engaged and hopefully keep them playing with us over a sort of longer period of time. But part of that is just to check that they're okay, that their circumstances haven't changed as well. And there are certain factors like, older people living alone, where we would also work with the canvassers to provide training to them so that they know in those situations to sense check what's happening as well. We occasionally will get, a relative phoning in saying that they think in a particular circumstance, that their relative has been pressurised or something. And generally, I don't think that's the case. I think that's a perception. But if there's any grey areas or any doubt at all, then we always play safe and we just stop. We stop it.
I think that's super important, isn't it? Because ultimately, what EHAT is about saving lives and not sort of offsetting one type of harm for another. Super important to address it.
Yeah, definitely. And I really love that the purpose-led playing and actually how you're balancing something that's fun and sustainable, but really the messaging is that every pound they play is going to support a really important local charity. So I think that seems to be at the heart of the lottery. So Mark, let's dive into your second campaign, the Fund 100 Christmas Appeal. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in the run-up to Christmas 2025, we thought we'd try something a little bit different, and wanted to really sort of take advantage of sort of a pattern that we'd seen sort of over time, which I think other charities experience as well, which is, people's tendency to give does increase in the run-up to Christmas, which is why you get so much
Yep.
direct mail in the lead up, as well as your Christmas cards. So we were very aware of that, and we wanted to do something that really sort of focused and energized that tendency. So at the core of what we do is getting the emergency room to the patient, and the way that we do that is by missions. So basically using the helicopter and the rapid response vehicles to 24/7, 365 days a year, when there's a need, to get our paramedics and our doctors to the scene as quickly as possible. So we've got a really clear message that typically in a given year there's 2,000 missions across Essex and Hertfordshire, and we thought that actually it would be nice to sort of focus on what element of that typically takes place over the festive period. And we calculated that over the last couple of years we'd averaged around 100 missions. So, you know, whether it's Christmas Day, whether it's New Year's Day, Boxing Day, we're still delivering the same service.
Yeah.
Over that sort of 12 days of Christmas, you know, that extended sort of period of sort of Advent, we're talking about 100 missions typically on average. So we thought, wouldn't it be nice if we did a focus campaign to actually fund those 100 missions above and beyond our usual level of fundraising? The idea was to try some different channels. So we brought in an external production company to help us produce a 30-second advert.
A TV advert.
TV advert, that's right. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to use some of the digital TV channels to see whether we could do some sort of targeted focusing of that advert to get to the audiences that we really wanted to get to. And we thought that would give us a focus and an uplift to our typical ongoing fundraising.
A TV ad sounds incredibly expensive. What did it cost to make, and what was the ROI? Did you achieve your target?
So I should probably just say that the concept behind the advert, I think, was quite a nice, neat one, which was basically the advert starts with the crew sitting down at one of our bases to have their Christmas dinner in the midst of a busy shift. And just as they're ready to tuck into their wonderful looking Christmas meal with all the trimmings, the red light and the klaxon goes off and the callers come in and they need to abandon their dinner and go out and respond. And then the advert finishes with the helicopter taking off with the ask.
Yeah.
So
I think we've got the video here to show. Let's have a quick look.
Christmas is one of our busiest times of the year. When the call comes in, we know time is critical and every second could save a life. Essex and Herts Air Ambulance is a charity, and we rely on people like you. This Christmas, over 100 people will need us. Help us reach them. To donate, call us or search Essex and Herts Air Ambulance.
So simple. Yeah, I can imagine very effective. Or
yeah.
was it?
So it was. So I should just say that cost us about 20,000 to produce. That included a 2-day shoot. So it was definitely a sort of a higher than typical level of expenditure on a particular initiative.
Did that include the airtime effect?
No, so
Okay.
we've sort of the sort of media buying budget was about 50,000,
Okay.
and that was spread across ITVX and sort of Sky's targeted advertising model, and then we also had some pausable advertising with both ITVX again and Channel 4. So the total expenditure across the production and the sort of buying the airtime was 70,000.
And were those channels advised to you, Mark, through the media buying company?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think they were particularly attractive to us because you know, on the face of it, they allow you to sort of target particular demographics, particular postcodes. So it was that sort of granularity that we were looking for. We knew the audience that we wanted to try and engage with, and we felt that was the most effective, rather than a sort of a more traditional sort of broad brush television advertising approach.
And you benefited from any sort of charitable discounts?
No, I don't think we did on that occasion.
And it was Christmas.
I mean, it's worth bringing up because often that could be the case, but this is a TV advert with all the expense you would expect if you were to create an advert and to put it out on these channels. So we're talking about 70k all in.
Yeah, that's right. And I think at the heart of it is that we recognise that there's a massive learning opportunity for us. Emma quite rightly asked about whether it was worth it or what was the return. So one of the challenges that we've got, and one of the key learning points, is that we can't give an overly specific answer to that. And I think one of the challenges that this campaign has exposed to us is that we've got some work to do on our CRM and the sort of the digital platforms that we're using as a charity to be able to sort of track key metrics around these sort of campaigns. So I think, we went for a slightly more sophisticated approach, but we didn't necessarily have the databases and the information sitting behind that for us to be able to sort of track at a granular level what was working, what wasn't. What I can say is at a sort of an overarching level, the 100 missions at an average cost of 2,800 per mission meant that we were targeting 280,000. Over the period that we were focusing the campaign, we raised in total 340,000.
Wow.
Which was a significant uplift on our typical December fundraising income. About 110,000 better than we did in the previous year. However, the challenge that we've got is that we also were running a competing campaign for 2 weeks of the festive period, because it was the first time last year that we took part in the Big Give, which is a sort of a nationally coordinated match funding opportunity. Now, we recorded the TV advert back in September, knowing that that was going to be a key part of our sort of Christmas campaign. We took the decision sort of fairly late in the year to actually bid for the Big Give, and didn't find out until well into October that we'd actually also been successful with that.
Okay.
So
You're
we
not
decided
gonna
to
turn that down, are you?
No.
Even
So we decided to sort of run with it.
Yeah.
And we did very well out of that as well. I think the total amount that we were sort of seeking to match fund was close to 20,000. I think we almost got there, but not quite. So then if you go back to those sort of high level numbers that I was talking about, we did 110,000 better overall, but we sort of suspect probably a third of that was maybe to do with the Big Give.
Okay, so it skewed the numbers slightly, maybe.
So then I think it sort of starts to look like the ROI was probably fairly modest in terms of the TV, and I think that's something that we need to learn from.
So out of the sort of 100k net benefit from that year versus previous year, a third of that it perhaps is attributable towards the Big Give. So you're around sort of like 60, 70k, with the adverts cost being around that number. It feels like a break-even activity.
Yeah, I think probably overall we did slightly better than break-even, but not enough arguably to justify. Normally if you're investing, particularly as a charity, that if you're investing sort of 70,000 in something, you want more than a small number of thousands back, don't you? So I think if you compare it to the ROI on the lottery or regular giving and some of the other campaigns that we've run, I think it was great from a profile point of view. I think we can certainly say that it gave us some collateral that we've been able to use in other settings as well. So some of the footage that we got from the 2-day shoot, we're using actively on our website on an ongoing basis. It's supporting some of our socials. It's being edited into other videos that we use for events and activities. So there's a sort of a indirect benefit that I think we've had from commissioning that work as well. But I think what we've recognised is that if we're going to do anything like that again in the future, we need to make sure that we can track the metrics much more accurately, because I'm making assumptions based on those sort of high level numbers. What we're not able to really clearly do is say, actually, on this occasion, this particular running the advert in this way for this period delivered X views, X benefits, X people that gave. Yeah. So we need to be able to track that more effectively in the future.
I think it's interesting because given I am a resident in your in the same demographic that you operate, the same geographical area, it's interesting because that advert came up a lot for me. And it was so impressive, because the advert was beautifully shot and so simple and very powerful in its messaging, and then it did make me think, wow, this must have cost a lot of money. EHAT must be doing quite well financially, because you don't often see a regional charity advertising on TV like you did. So I wonder how it has changed perceptions of the organisation.
In a positive way or in a detrimental way?
I would say positive. Not that, I don't know, for me, it just made me think, I was really impressed by it. And it didn't make me think, oh, if they're running TV ads, they don't need my money. It's, what an incredible charity. I think the TV campaign, from my perspective, maybe elevated what you were doing. But it'd be interesting if you had any feedback.
Yeah, well, if I come to that, so I think the context is that as a charity, we have to raise just over £1 million every month, month in, month out.
Yeah.
Over the last 2 or 3 years, income has been a little bit variable because timing of gifts in wills coming in can make a big difference in a given year as to whether it's a good year or a challenging year. We're also a key income stream for us in terms of our end of year performance is our investment income, because we have money that's been built up in our reserves over the year that are there for a rainy day, but also we do benefit from movements in that income over time. And there's been huge fluctuations, as I'm sure you're aware, over the last few years. So we've actually had as many years where we've been running a deficit as we've been running a surplus in recent years, and we're not complacent. So the context was not, we're fortunate to have money and therefore we're going to spend it on something sort of glossy and new. The context was we need to be more ambitious because actually it's really hard to deliver the income that we need. And we don't just want to keep protecting what we do. We know there are opportunities to meet greater need than we are currently, and we want to have a buffer to be able to invest in the future. So that was our thought process. I think most people without a sort of a marketing knowledge wouldn't necessarily have picked up on the fact that the cost was an issue, and certainly we've not had the feedback from any of our supporters around them being concerned about that in any way at all. I think it has been helpful to our profile, and I think we've probably had, a modest level of sort of positive feedback around that about sort of reinforcing people's engagement. I think what we've found though is that because we got quite focused on delivering a sort of a 30-second TV advert was at the heart of that Fund 100 campaign. When we then tried to translate that into sort of social and digital channels, with hindsight, the first 3 to 5 seconds of the advert aren't the most captivating. So one of the things that had to happen on the hoof during the course of that campaign running was we had to recut the footage because just running the start of the advert was not working on the other channels because it was just the crew eating their dinner. And people weren't staying around long enough to see them get into the helicopter and go and meet the needs. So we changed the sort of running order a little bit using the existing footage to make it more impactful on sort of digital and social. And actually, whilst again we can't get to the granular level that we would like to in the future, we can see in the latter part of the campaign we did better. So the distribution of the fundraising income was better once we tackled that issue.
It's interesting that you've been able to kind of very quickly change the ad based on the data that you had. You've, this segment of the show in particular is about the learnings. You've mentioned about not running competing campaigns, especially to the same demographics, because you're asking for money in both sense. They're not going to, double their donation because they've seen or been a part of 2 different ad campaigns. The second is about data, and I want to dig into that a little bit more. Now, the perception I imagine of many of our listeners is if you're using ITVX and other digital channels, you mentioned pausable ads. Those are often, success is measured through how many people say click it into the ad or perform some action that ultimately ends up them seeing some content that sits also somewhere else digitally. Was that what in particular was the issue around how you were able or not able to track that kind of activity?
So the sort of the challenge is sort of the chain and following the chain through in terms of actually people viewing and then interacting with the advert and clicking through to a giving page and then that being able to sort of track through to the CRM. So the particular issue that we've got at the moment is our website is very much in need of updating. So what we were struggling with was the sort of the disconnect between the sort of the person viewing, the person clicking through, the person then making potentially a donation, and then that donation feeding through to the CRM. So we knew how we wanted it to work, but the reality was that sitting behind our website, there are some issues with that sort of connectivity and links to the various payment systems and things that we use. So we've got the social channels, the digital channels, we've got the landing page, we've got the payment providers that we use, and then we've got the sort of the link through to the CRM. Those are not sort of interacting in the way that we need them to, and that's a big piece of work for us at the moment to address that.
Interesting. I mean, but back at Exceptional where I work, data analytics so important, and often it is around the technical element that can let things down, and getting systems to kind of speak to each other and data passing from each sort of interaction and channel to the next. I can see perhaps a frustration.
Once the data gets into our CRM, the quality is good, and when we've done audits on that, we know that actually compared to a lot of other companies and charities, actually we're doing pretty well in terms of the data. It's just that to get there's been quite a lot of manual workarounds to actually get the data, and we're probably missing out on some of that flow through in data. So that we've got a strong number of people supporting us, and we've got some of their details, but we're doing okay, but we could do so much better. And if we are going to be ambitious about what we deliver in terms of our future purpose as a charity, we've got to do better in that area. Once
the tracking is ironed out, would you run another TV ad?
I certainly wouldn't say no. I mean, I think we've got to be open to taking some risks and trying things differently. And I think we've got a lot of goodwill amongst our supporters that we've built up over time. And I think we certainly shouldn't be complacent about that. And as I've said before, our reputation is absolutely key. But one of the things you've got to do in any business, and certainly in any charity, is occasionally you've got to take calculated risks. So because we've got that strong bank of goodwill, we should try some things that are a little bit different. And, there are lots of other campaigns and things that we've got in the pipeline that I think we are looking to push the boundaries and try some different sort of tone of voice and different channels, which I think are really exciting. But I think TV specifically is not something we're going to rush back to.
Yes.
I think digital and socials we're probably not exploiting to their max, and that's where we should go first. Radio continues to work quite well with us, for us with other campaigns as well. So certainly with our legacy marketing that we're doing at the moment, radio will be a big part of that. And also sort of posters and more sort of visual media when you're out and about. So I think we need to be careful about not getting too excited, because the production process, I think, in producing a TV advert is quite different to perhaps some of those other channels, and that actually created some really good energy. There was a real buzz around the base while the process was underway. But I think it's constantly reminding yourself that that's not the purpose. So with a lot of caveats, we would keep an open mind.
I think many of our listeners, and me included, very keen to understand how much TV ads do cost, because in my mind, growing up watching TV, they were, it'd be millions of pounds. That's what you thought ads on TV would have absolutely cost.
If it's half time at the Super Bowl, then you really do need deep pockets.
Yes, absolutely.
But the way that you've broken it down has been really sort of helpful, very helpful actually, just to understanding what's gone into the production side, and then what the airtime cost. Plus as well, you mentioned about repurposing the content for social. It's a huge acknowledgement, because it's not just for TV, or it's not just for the ad. Actually, how you then use that and continue to use it, and perhaps you even are now, is just as important.
Yeah, absolutely. If you watch the advert and then visit our webpage, you'll recognise a lot of the content.
In each of our episodes, we also like to shout out some other organisations that have put a campaign in the wild, as we like to call it. And today we're going to talk about the Dignity in Dying campaign. Now, Mark, this one stood out for you for a couple of reasons. I think when we spoke in our pre-show call, it was about the Westminster ads that were visible and displayed at the same time the MPs were taking a vote on this issue. Tell us a bit more about why that was important.
Yeah, so it's an issue that sort of resonates with me, because my previous role before I was at Essex and Herts Air Ambulance was chief executive of a local hospice charity for 12 years. And one of the key issues facing the end-of-life care sector in the UK for the last few years has been the ongoing debate about assisted dying. So it's very hard to operate in the hospice space without coming across that as an issue that you're confronting on a regular basis. It's a real hot topic for staff, real hot topic for volunteers and supporters as well. So it was something that I'd taken an active interest and sort of been monitoring over the years. I've picked this campaign because I think it's quite striking, and I think it certainly provoked a range of views, because what it did was it deliberately went against some of the sort of, I guess, traditional sort of people's perceptions of this debate and the sort of imagery that you would expect, which tends to be extremely serious, tends to often reflect some of the arguments for assisted dying, so emphasising perhaps people being in pain or people struggling in some way, quite often reflects a sort of a particular age profile, because people are more likely to have a terminal illness and be dying, the older you are and the longer you live. So, some of the imagery tends to be quite sort of serious, quite downbeat, and sort of focus on older people. Now, this campaign was run at a pivotal point in the lead up to the sort of the first vote in the Commons on the current bill that's going through Parliament. And it was very clear from all of the sort of stats that both sides of the argument knew that the vote was going to be close. And it was a case of what could each side do to sort of push that. There was loads of lobbying going on, loads of debate in the media about it. But the thing that really sort of struck me from the Dignity in Dying campaign was such a provocative approach of trying to get MPs' attention, literally as they're arriving at Westminster tube station with huge tube posters with young people. Literally one of the images that I really remember vividly was a young woman dancing around her kitchen. And obviously the implication was that, she was in favour of law change and the vote had been successful. And obviously that was the message that Dignity in Dying would have been pushing as an organisation campaigning for law change. So I think, what really sort of struck me was that it very vividly pushed against existing norms. It was hugely impactful in terms of prompting reaction within the wider sector. And I'm pretty confident it certainly got the attention of sort of MPs as they were sort of deciding.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting campaign for everything that you've just mentioned. For me, in doing some research around it, it's one of those campaigns where you've got a really specific target audience and you want them to make or to take a specific action. And that's a marketer's dream. When we've got a brief that says we want you to target these people and success is measured through them doing this specific action at this particular time, we go, great, that is a campaign that we can look at. So I thought that was interesting in itself. There is a question around whether we should be using advertising to influence politics, and lobbying for social change. I'm either or, to be honest. It's there's the same techniques are still used here. I wonder how the impact could have been measured though, because we've got some stats here. This was around November 24, and the vote ended up being 330 MPs in favour and 275 were against it. So you could say that it was successful, but could it be relied purely on these ads, or perhaps it's something else, or maybe there's a compound effect? Who knows?
The bill's still going through the House. The bill's going through the House of Lords at the moment, pending a third vote in the Commons. But at the moment, it even looks questionable about whether there will be enough time in the sort of parliamentary calendar for it to complete its process. So there's a possibility that it won't pass just simply because of time running out, regardless of what the final vote is. I think your point, Ian, is well made. I think it's very hard, I would imagine, to be able to establish whether that was the factor that made the difference. But I think the thing that really sort of struck me was that there was so much lobbying going on, so many people being encouraged on both sides to write to their constituency MPs, etc. I think there's no way you could possibly unpick all of that. And a lot of individual MPs wrestling with their conscience. I think it was very clear, having spoken to a number of MPs myself during that sort of process, that for a lot of them, some were trying to take a view on the balance of views from their constituents, and others saw it as a personal matter of conscience and were wrestling with that. So I think even if the advertising campaign had been really effective, it wouldn't have addressed the fact that a lot of MPs were deciding it as a matter of conscience. Yeah. But what it did do is it moved away from the arguments that are used in favour of law change to anticipating the feeling for certain people if the law change passed. And I think that was the thing at the crux of it that I thought was really exciting and a bit different.
The messaging. Yes, I can see that, absolutely. And you're right, sort of putting oneself in the future outcome that the ads were attempting were advocating for. I'd love to have been in the boardroom at the time when this idea was discussed, because again, coming back to kind of how you would know if this was successful, this is not an impulsive action you're asking people to make. This is not about, do I buy something for £5 or not? This is, I would hope, an issue that's being voted on based on years of understanding the issues, of educating oneself. So, it could equally be argued, what difference is a campaign at the very last minute and the messaging around the campaign going to actually make?
This is an interesting campaign for all of the reasons you've both mentioned, and I think as well from an audience perspective, there's people who are at this point who they are mentally competent adults who are facing terminal illness, they don't want to be here, and they are in that moment fighting to have the right to die. But then you've got their families and everyone else affected, or people with a view on it, the people in the medical profession. I think this campaign spanned so many people across society. It made you stop and think, whether you know someone or you're in that position, what would you choose if that was you? What would you want for your mum or for someone you know? So I think it was powerful. And like I said, the branding as well, I think was very captivating. It was all quite vivid, to use your word, Mark, and generally really thought-provoking. I think it probably captured everyone's attention.
Do you think you would consider big tube ads if you wanted to raise money in this way?
Well, potentially, yeah. I think the issue for us in that regard would probably be a more practical one around our target audiences in Essex and Herts. So we do some fundraising in and around London, because obviously a lot of people that live in Essex and Herts have sort of businesses here. So there's a little bit of overlap there, but I think we'd need to be sensitive to the fact that there is also a London air ambulance, so anything we needed to do would be sort of proportionate. Interestingly, we are doing a variation on that, which is quite large. Posters and advertising at commuter stations on the route into London, and we're particularly focusing on Hertfordshire. Traditionally, about 2/3 of our activity and about 2/3 of our fundraising is skewed towards Essex rather than Hertfordshire. That's something we're keen to address because whilst Essex is bigger in population terms than Hertfordshire, it's not that much bigger. So we would like to sort of address that balance. So we've targeted sort of the affluent middle class and the commuter categories within the sort of the acorn segmentation of sort of our local population. And we've really focused on those sort of mainline stations down into London, and we're using some advertising there. So that's going to start fairly soon. So I guess we'll get some data hopefully fairly soon on whether that's been successful for us. But I think trying different things is key, and I think that campaign was good at actually speaking to its supporter base. So I think I would certainly advocate that at Essex and Herts Air Ambulance we need to be willing to take risks on an ongoing basis, try different things, and as I say, as long as we're respectful and show an understanding and insight into our core supporters in the way that we execute that, I don't think we should be afraid to trying some different things.
What campaigns have you got coming up then? Anything else we should be looking out for?
So a big push is on our regular giving product. So we talked quite a lot about lottery earlier in the podcast. So the other one that we're pushing, which has a sort of a similar business model but without the ability to win prizes, is the regular giving. Now, regular giving is something that has huge potential for us because it allows us to play to our existing strengths. We know how to run an effective canvassing operation. We know how to steward and maintain relationships with supporters once we've recruited them. But it gives us an even stronger ROI because there's no prizes, and actually addresses some of those ethical issues and some of those catchments and particular postcodes that we know the lottery is not cutting through. It gives us something which is a more universal sort of fundraising product. So keep an eye out. You will see lots of activity pushing that. The other thing that we're really keen to do is remind people how important gifts in wills are. So it's something you'll hear regularly from a lot of charities because it's such an important income stream, and it's a way that people can make a difference and really leave a legacy in the most meaningful way possible. So for us, we generally raise about 3 million a year, just over, in legacy. Very low overhead associated with that. But we've managed to achieve that off the back of our general communications and engagement. We haven't actually done any focused marketing on that in a meaningful way for some time. So we're going to be doing a bit of a big push this year with a sort of a new set of messages, some new collateral, and really pushing that through a number of different channels just to remind people how important that is.
Brilliant. I look forward to seeing it. Before we go, Mark, are there any advice that you would give to other sector leaders?
Yeah, so as a charity leader, for me, money and the mission are the two most important things because you can't have one without the other. However noble our charitable purpose, if we don't have the funds to support it, we can't make a meaningful impact for our communities. And I think the thing I always try and remember at the heart of that is our reputation and our brand. And we need to make sure that our communications are effective, and we need to make sure that our messaging is really cutting through with our supporters, past, present and future, and be willing to be bold and try some different things and understand that not everything is going to work first time, but that shouldn't stop us from pushing the boundaries, because if we don't use our brand and reputation and leverage them in a way to make a difference, we're never going to fulfill the ambition that might be possible.
And if people wanted to find out a bit more about you or to support you, how can they do that?
So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so Mark Jarman-Howe on LinkedIn, or you can find more information about me on our Essex and Herts Air Ambulance website, which is www.ehat.org.
Brilliant, thank you.
Well, that's a wrap. We want to thank Mark for joining us in this week's episode. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, your insight and your expertise. It's been really great to have you on. And to our listeners, our audience, don't forget to head over to pitchpurpose.co.uk, where you'll find links to all available episodes. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and YouTube, and you can check us out on social media. We're on Instagram, TikTok and LinkedIn. This is Pitch Purpose with Emma Healy and Ian Scott, a marketing podcast for leaders in purpose-driven organisations.
Brilliant. Bye for now.